Hi, good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be together with all of you. I want to thank my friends Adele Weinstein, Sisterhood President, Fran Kane and Marilyn Cohen, and all of the leadership of Beth Tikvah women who have worked so hard to bring you this Torah Fund program today. I look forward to hearing from Rabbi Ariella Rosen, and I know that you will all learn from her Torah study. Women's League looks forward to sharing more events, excuse me, with all of our members and sisterhoods through the magic of Zoom. All of our members can join in on programs from all over North America. And for more information on that, please read our weekly newsletter called Women's League Week. It lists many opportunities for learning and engagement. Everyone who belongs to Women's League as a sisterhood member can join any and all programs across North America. I want to highlight one program that happens daily, and Adele already referred to it. Members of Women's League from all over North America, including your own Adele, Fran, and Marilyn, join about 80 other women every Monday through Thursday at noon East Coast time. This program is called Makom B'Yachad, a place to be together. We gather together b'yachad to recite a Mishaberach prayer, read the Psalm of the day, and recite Mornis Kaddish. And what makes this program so special is that we also study every day. We started on March 13th of last year, almost 1 year ago to the day. We finished studying the entire book of Psalms, and now we are studying Pirkei Avot. What makes this program even more amazing is that many days we are taught by our executive director, Rabbi Alan Wollens Fields, but many other days we are taught by our own members, most of whom are not professional teachers. We would love to have you join us for the best 30 minutes of your day. Please look for the link in the weekly newsletter that comes out on Monday. And if you do not get the newsletter, please put your name and email in the chat and I will subscribe you. Thank you again to the Beth Tikvah women for inviting me today. I will be leaving just a little bit early, and through the magic of Zoom, I'll be traveling to New Jersey for another sisterhood event. But I hope to see you all at noon on Makom B'Yachad. Shalom.
Thank you very much, Debbie. I really appreciate your taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here today. And just to reiterate what Debbie said, I actually went on to the program that we have, the daily program, and I started out saying a Kaddish for my father, and the year has been up and I continue going, and it's so wonderful to see so many lovely, talented, educated women on the program. It's quite a pleasure to be there. I'd also like to mention that our president from our region is here today, Joan Lowenstein. And welcome, Joan. It's so nice to see you. And we have people from all over today, and it's lovely that it's not just Beth Tikvah. We have Beth David, we have people from the States, and we have from London, Ontario. And it's great that you could join us today. Now I'd like to introduce our International Torah Fund Chair for Women's League for the Conservative Judaism, Barbara Ezring, to say a few words.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Adele, and thank you so much for inviting me to share your Torah Fund event. It is an honor for me to bring greetings on behalf of Women's League for Conservative Judaism's dedicated philanthropy, Torah Fund. We thank you so much for supporting Torah Fund with today's program. Your donations to the B'Yachad General Campaign fund scholarships and programming at the 5 conservative Masorti institutions of higher education: the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York, Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies in Los Angeles, Schechter Institutes in Jerusalem, Seminario Rabbinico Latinoamericano in Buenos Aires, and Zacharias Frankel College in Potsdam. Your gift to creating new spaces, our designated gift campaign, will provide at JTS the Women's League study space in the new undergraduate residence hall and at Ziegler, the Women's League Institute on Gender Bias and Harassment. Becoming a member of the Torah Fund Legacy Society allows you, through planned giving, to continue to meet the needs of future generations of our seminary students. Thank you to each Beth Tikvah woman for today's program, and thank you to everyone for your donations to Torah Fund.
Thank you very much, Barbara, for your lovely words. And I'm sorry I didn't even welcome our guest speaker, Rabbi Ariella Rosen, and we will be talking more about her very soon. Now for a few words, one of our Beth Tikvah Women Executive members and one of today's committee members, Rivi Blas, will say a few words to introduce the video on Dr. Shuly Rubin Schwartz. Rivi?
It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Shuly Rubin Schwartz, Jewish Theological Seminary's 8th Chancellor and the first woman to serve as Chancellor. She is a beloved leader and respected scholar in the JTS and broader Jewish communities for almost 30 years. She earned her BA from Barnard College and her MA and PhD from JTS. Among her credits is that she has served as Dean of Albert A. List College of Jewish Studies, JTS Undergraduate School. She strengthened and expanded List College's dual degree program with Columbia University and Barnard College, mentoring over 1,000 students. She has also served as Dean of the Gershon Kest Graduate School. She is an author of several books and numerous articles on American Jewish history and culture. Dr. Schwartz's deep leadership experience, expansive academic background, and broad communal perspective will propel JTS forward as we face uncertain times during this public health and economic crisis. I warmly welcome Dr. Schwartz via video to address us today.
I offer a blessing as you begin your sacred work by sharing a humble 17th century women's prayer, a Techina, from a collection, 4 Centuries of Jewish Women's Spirituality, edited in the 90s by my colleagues Ellen Umansky and Diane Ashton. This Techina was no doubt uttered by countless women in pre-modern Europe just as they put their unbaked challah into the oven. Lord of all the world, in your hand is all blessing. I come now to revere your holiness, and I pray to you to bestow your blessing on the baked goods. Send an angel to guard the baking, so that all will be well baked, will rise nicely, and will not burn, to honor the holy Sabbath, and over which one recites the holy blessing, as you blessed the dough of Sarah and Rebekah, our mothers. My Lord God, listen to my voice. You are the God who hears the voices of those who call you with the whole heart. May you be praised in eternity. This short prayer illustrates how Jewish women saw holiness in the homely act of baking bread and found a way to consecrate it. Through their care and devotion to challah baking, and with God's help, they could fulfill the essential mitzvah of keeping Shabbat. Ordinarily, such a blessing might feel dated and disconnected from our contemporary lives. But over the past months, many of us have struggled to sanctify time within the confines of our homes, and some return to rituals from our collective past, such as challah baking. As we see from this Techina, our foremothers knew instinctively how important even mundane chores were to sustaining us. In this pandemic time, when we must gather virtually, we are even more keenly attuned to the importance of nurturing togetherness and planning for the future. We are heartbroken by the illness, pain, and inequities around us, and in this challenging time, I offer my blessing that we use our power as Jewish women to be a force for nourishment for our loved ones, our Jewish community, our society, and our world. Speaking to you, the women of Women's League for Conservative Judaism today, fills me with tears of joy and gratitude. As an American Jewish historian who focuses on gender and on the history of American Judaism, and as someone who has held positions of leadership at JTS for 30 years, I am profoundly aware of the significance of being the first woman chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary. I know how challenging the path to leadership has been for women throughout history, but I have also studied and long admired those female leaders who blazed the trails that we walk on. Chief among them is the founder of Women's League, Matilda Schachter, wife of the second president of JTS, Solomon Schachter. Matilda was a brilliant, visionary, savvy organizer and magnetic personality, and she understood that conservative Judaism would flourish only if women's talents were harnessed along with men's. She went even further with words that sound as if they could be uttered by us today. I quote, "There never was a time when the religious and moral influence of women was more sorely needed than at the present day." And Schachter understood Women's League's impact being amplified by focusing on supporting the training of future Jewish leaders. Through Torah Fund, you have been supporting residential life, student scholarships, religious life, and more at JTS for over a century, and more recently at all 5 conservative seminaries. At JTS this year alone, you support List College Alan Imar, who studies Talmud and Rabbinics at JTS and history at Columbia, served as List College class president, interned for Merkaz USA, served as a music specialist at Congregation Beth El in South Orange, New Jersey, and is now studying for a semester at Pardes in Israel. You support third-year rabbinical student Rish Groner, who has been an innovative Jewish educator in her home community in Australia, impacting American college students in Israel, and Montessori preschoolers, bar mitzvah students, and teens in the United States. In 2019, Rish was named Jewish Forward's 36 under 36. Daniel Ross Goodman, a PhD candidate in modern Jewish studies, who already enriches the Jewish world through his writing in journals, magazines, and newspapers, including the Wall Street Journal, Tablet, and the Harvard Divinity School Bulletin. Cantorial student Daniela Risman, who worked in the Jewish nonprofit world and as an opera singer, and hopes to fuse her passions to bring the broad range of Jewish music and chazanut to the communities she serves. And finally, Jewish education MA candidate Eva Bogomolny, who studies pedagogy and teaching with a concentration in disabilities inclusion and advocacy. She hopes to teach in a Jewish day school and make Jewish spaces accessible to all types of learners. Women's League was birthed at JTS, and you, especially through Torah Fund, remain so much a part of the fabric at JTS, both literally when we sit in the synagogue for mincha, hopefully safely soon on the new chairs that we thank you for and eagerly await, and figuratively through our history and through the amazing students you have supported over the decades. Their impact as rabbis and cantors, as Jewish educators, and as lay leaders, Jewish communal professionals, and Jewish studies professors has enriched the entire Jewish landscape. Your support is especially important during these challenging times when so many families are struggling, students need additional support, when programming requires more ingenuity and technological support than ever, and resources are more limited. As this virtual meeting attests, Women's League members understand the importance of adaptability, and you've done such an amazing job through this new format to reinforce the concept of community and shared purpose, and to find new ways to advance the work of Torah Fund. Matilda Schachter would be so deeply gratified to know this, to see the many gifted female leadership among us, and to witness a woman in the role of chancellor building proudly on the leadership of so many talented women.
That was wonderful. What excellent words. And thank you, Rivi, for introducing Dr. Shuly Rubin Schwartz. I'd now like to welcome my mom, Fran Kane, Torah Fund Chair for Beth Tikvah Women, to introduce our guest speaker, Rabbi Ariella Rosen. You have to unmute, Mom.
There we go. Rabbi Ariella Rosen is the new senior Jewish educator at Hillel, Ontario, serving students at the University of Toronto, York, and Ryerson. She grew up in West Hartford, Connecticut, and received her undergraduate degree from List College, the joint program between Columbia University and the Jewish Theological Seminary, with majors in psychology and midrash. She returned to JTS for rabbinical school, where she was ordained in 2015. Spent 3 years serving as a rabbinic team at Temple Adas Israel in Marion Station, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Philadelphia. Prior to coming to Toronto, she was director of rabbinical and cantorial school admissions at JTS, guiding prospective students along their journey to become Jewish communal leaders. In addition, she spent several years serving on the faculty of the Cornerstone Seminar, a leadership training program for Jewish camp counselors, and spent many summers at Camp Ramah in New England. Rabbi Rosen loves to engage creatively with Jewish ideas and texts, and seeks to incorporate a sense of joy and play alongside the profound and meaningful. Please join me in welcoming Rabbi Ariella Rosen, who will lead us in our Torah study.
Thank you so much, Fran, and everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this beautiful experience with all of you today. It's truly a privilege and a pleasure for me. As somebody who moved to Toronto in July, I feel like my opportunity to get connected to the broader community has been more limited because of the pandemic, unfortunately. So this is a really special opportunity to start to connect with some of you more. So thank you again. You may have heard from my bio that I have spent a lot of time in my life at JTS. 12 years or so, more specifically, 4.5 years, or you could extend it to 5 as an undergraduate student in the joint program with Columbia University, 5 years as a rabbinical student, and 2 years as the admissions director for the rabbinical and cantorial schools. But I have to tell you that my JTS story actually starts a little bit earlier than that, because my parents actually met there. So I've had it in my blood for a long time that this institution and the institutions of the conservative movement would be important to me, from before I was even thought of as somebody who might be in the world. So my father is a rabbi, my mother is a Jewish educator who just retired from over 40 years in the Jewish day school world. So it really does feel like a special thing to be able to offer appreciation for what Torah Fund does and what all of you enable by your generosity and your participation in it. So I'll give you a little bit more context of where I'm coming from and sort of where I've seen some of the benefits of Torah Fund. And then I want to jump right into learning together, and then we'll tie it together at the end. I know there will be time for question and conversation as well. And I wish this could be more interactive than it Zoom enables. So we'll do our best with that. But I guess a little bit more to say is that Shuly Schwartz, who you just heard from, Dr. Shuly Schwartz, was my dean for many years as an undergraduate student. And again, when I was pursuing my master's as part of rabbinical school. And everything that you saw from her, I experienced as well as her student. She really is a tremendous leader. And when she was named chancellor of JTS back in last spring, the amount of joy that the collective joy that was sort of out there in the world was moving. It's so incredibly moving. And her leadership is already transformative, even just in this short time that she's been in the role. So some things I wanted to share also is, I've seen the benefits of Torah Fund. I used to pray every day in Women's League Seminary Synagogue in what we still call Willis. I got to see the samples of the new chairs that they were bringing in that unfortunately then, the building closed before we could experience them, but others will have that chance soon. I lived in Matilda Schachter Residence Hall when it was still JTS property, and right before the shutdown happened last March, I had a chance to see the new residence hall on JTS, on the JTS campus, and it is gorgeous. It is really stunning and an incredible living space. So you should know that the funding has been put to really good use, and the students are really appreciative of having such a comfortable and up-to-date living space for themselves. Some other things to share. My rabbinical school class was the first class at JTS to have more women than men. Not by a lot. I think we were 8 women and 6 men, but it was a first, and it was an exciting thing. And since then, there has been a real, I'd say, every class has their different ratio, but there's a real balance and equality of gender in the school. When I started, it was about 25% women, and now that just having left, I think the school is about half and half, which is a really fantastic thing to see. When I was in rabbinical school and had the opportunity to spend a year in Israel, I studied at the Schachter Institute, which is also a wonderful place to learn. Many of my classmates there were students from the Seminario, who are top-notch rabbis. Their Hebrew was way better than all of ours, so we learned a lot from being in class with them. And many of you also know that I'm partnered with Rabbi Becca Walker, who spoke at this event last year, and I know some of the folks here are Beth David people, and she studied at the Ziegler School. So I feel like I've had no contact with Zachariah Frankel, unfortunately, in Germany, but every other seminary, I feel like I have at least some contact and some experience with, and I'm grateful for that. I'm happy to tell you more along the way, but for now, I just want to say thank you, because everything I learned about how to teach and how to study and how to connect Torah and to contemporary ideas into our lives are things that I gained from my time as a student at JTS, and I know that Torah Fund was a big part of enabling that to happen for me. So with that, maybe we'll go right in. I'm going to share my screen so that we can look at text together. And my ask is that, it's hard for me to talk and do things at the same time. Here we go. Okay. So my hope is that because this is hard to make interactive, unlike, if we were in the same room, I could potentially put you into groups to talk to each other a little bit. And we could, there are ways to do that on Zoom, but I think we'll stay all together this morning. Please feel free to use the chat if you have any questions or comments about the text. Excuse me, personal, questions and comments and those sorts of things we'll save time for at the end. And also if you decide that you'd rather comment or ask a question about what we learned together afterwards during the question and answer portion, that of course is welcome too. I'm going to zoom in on my screen because I know this text is small. So I've learned my lesson in sharing screen that it helps to make it a little bit bigger. So please give me a nod or a thumbs up if this works for you. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so if you need me to zoom in more, feel free again to use the chat. So I was really taken by this theme of this year being biyachad, of togetherness, being in this together. I'm sure it was not an accident that that was the theme that was chosen for this year, in which we are spending a lot of our time apart and unable to be together in ways that we previously were, because I think also this year has shown us all the ways that we actually can be together in ways that we never imagined. I've heard from many people that the daily coming together at noon for the Psalm of the Day and Kaddish and learning has been an incredible part of many people's days. And I think that's just one example of that. And so as I was thinking about this theme, I was thinking also about how we're about to head into our second Passover, our second Pesach, where we aren't necessarily going to be gathering in the same ways. And I want to acknowledge that for some of us, that might not actually change much because we're still able to be with, the same people we would be with. And for others of us, it's a dramatic change, and we are alone in ways that maybe are really challenging, and ways that we would prefer not to be alone. And some of us are able to use technology to our advantage for this, but it doesn't necessarily always feel the same. And for others, it's a way to make do with what we can have. And so I'm thinking a lot about that, both for myself and for others as well. We're doing a lot of work at Hillel to try to figure out, students who are going to be on their own for Pesach. What can we do for them? And so I was thinking a lot about Pesach, and then thinking a lot about where sort of Pesach falls in on the calendar as part of one of three of what's called the Shalosh Regalim, the three pilgrimage festivals, because those three festivals were the ultimate in being beyachad, in being together. In their original form, they were the time when the people would come from all over the land of Israel and gather in Jerusalem. And the whole way of doing Jewish for these holidays, when the temple still stood, was to physically be together in that place. And that would happen on Sukkot, on Pesach, and on Shavuot. And if you weren't coming to those places at that point in time, there wasn't really necessarily another powerful way to capture the essence of the holiday. But thankfully, in the innovation of rabbinic Judaism over the many centuries since the temple was destroyed, we've come up with many other ways to experience those holidays that aren't about going to a physical place. And so I want to look at some of the wisdom that has grown out of either the rituals of these holidays or the stories of these holidays to help us capture different ways of understanding what togetherness can be. So we're going to look at these three holidays together. So first we're going to go through them, and then I want to draw out some extra insight that I think can be helpful for us. And then I'd love to talk about it with anybody who has anything that they would like to say or ask about it. So that is our plan for the next, I guess, 15 minutes or so, and then we'll leave some time for questions as well. So the first insight comes from the holiday of Sukkot, only because in the Jewish calendar, that's the one we get to first. And this is you may have heard that I got my master's in Midrash. I really love Midrashic texts, rabbinic exegesis. So that's some of what we are working with today. And the first example comes from a collection of Midrash called Vayikra Rabbah, or Leviticus Rabbah, that talks about the lulav and the etrog. The four species that are held together, physically held together on Sukkot and shaken in all directions. And this is an explanation of what they stand for. And I want to acknowledge that some of what they stand for sort of assumes judgment that I prefer not to put on people, but I think that there's a broader lesson we can take from it, and I'll point that out. So this explanation is referring to the fruit of a beautiful tree, in Hebrew, Pri Etz Hadar, which is a line from the Torah. In talking about Sukkot, it says that these fruits are referring to the people of Israel. Just like this citron or this etrog, which has taste and smell, right? It's a fruit that you can eat and you can get, it smells really nice, has both of those elements to it. So too, Israel has among them people that have Torah and have good deeds. So in other words, they're going to equate taste and smell with people who have an impulse or an interest in studying, in learning, and people who have an impulse or an inclination toward doing good deeds. And so the etrog has both taste and smell. So it sort of refers to people who both have an interest in study and learning and do their best to do good deeds. The branches of a date palm, meaning the lulav, these are referring to the people of Israel as well. Just like this date, which it really refers to the palm frond itself, not to the fruits that come from it, which has taste and no smell. So I guess it does refer to the fruits, and they assume that dates don't really have much of a scent, even though I think they do, even which has taste and no smell. So too, Israel has among them those who have Torah, but do not have good deeds. So, in this case, the date maybe has a taste. So taste here refers to people who study, who are interested in learning, and maybe since it doesn't have a smell, that refers to the fact that maybe some people are really interested in study, but don't necessarily spend their time trying to do good in the world in a broader way. And a branch of a braided tree, or the myrtle, this refers to the people of Israel as well. Just like this myrtle, which has a smell, right? It has a scent and no taste. So too, Israel has among them those who do good work in the world, do good deeds, but don't necessarily have the experience with study or with learning Torah. And willows, these are referring to the people of Israel as well. Just like this willow, which has no smell and no taste, it's just sort of a leaf. So too, Israel has among them people who have not had the opportunity to study Torah and have not, occupied themselves with performing good deeds. So, I don't want to necessarily say these ratios are equal. I think in my experience, most of us try to do our best in doing good in the world. And most of us are at least, are curious and learning what we're able to learn and what we want to learn and what we can learn. And so, I don't want to assume, I think most of us would probably be in the lulav, in the etrog category. But anyway, this is how they break it down. And they say these are the 4 categories. And here's where it gets interesting. And I think this is where it gets powerful. What does the Holy One, blessed be God, do? To destroy them is impossible, right? God's not going to get rid of the ones that aren't like the etrog, that do both good deeds and study, but rather God binds them together into one grouping and says that, they'll sort of cover each other. And if you do that, God, will be elevated at that time. So in other words, the idea of having all of these different components in the lulav is that they get bundled together. They are treated like one body. So too, the entire community is treated as one body. And each of us, the things that we do strongly, the things that we do well, sort of help cover for those things that are maybe considered lacking in others. And I think what feels powerful to me about this is this idea that we are bundled together, that we are considered responsible for one another, that what we offer can help elevate and lift up somebody else. And so that is, one thing we can take from Sukkot is the idea that we are of one body, that our togetherness is that in the things that we each are able to bring, we are able to help sort of lift up others who are in our community who maybe aren't able to bring the same things that each of us are, and hopefully, somebody else might lift one of us up when we aren't able to sort of offer ourselves at our best, which I think is an important lesson for this pandemic time, because not all of us can do our absolute best every single day, and that's okay, right? We'll sort of take turns on this, and we are bundled together. We are one body as a people in this matter. So that's number 1, that's Sukkot. I'm going to move on to Pesach. And this is about the moment when the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, right? This is sort of one of the fundamental stories of Pesach, this moment of crossing the Red Sea and getting to freedom from slavery. The Torah reading for this is read on the 7th day of Pesach. And there's sort of this question that the rabbis have of how can it be that the Israelites knew what to sing, right? It's sort of, the story goes that they cross the sea, they get to the other side, and they start singing the song. But like, how do they know the words, right? How is it possible that they can all sing this song together if they've never heard the words before, if it's just sort of coming out spontaneously in this moment? So I'm briefly going to share this teaching from Rabbi Nehemiah, which comes from the Talmud, but I'm more interested in the box underneath it. So Rabbi Nehemiah says, they sang the song of the sea like a scribe or a cantor who recites aloud the introductory prayers and blessings before Shema in the synagogue. The cantor begins by saying the first words of the blessing, and they repeat after those first words and continue reciting the rest of the Shema together in unison. So too in the Song of the Sea, Moses began, and then everyone recited the entire song together with him. So they sort of imagine, if you think about it being in synagogue, there's some moments where the cantor might begin singing, and after the first few words that he or she has sung, then everyone else sort of joins in, and the rest of it is communal singing. So that is sort of an explanation of what it maybe looked like, but it doesn't explain how they actually knew the words. And so that is what I want to look at here. And this comment from the Torah commentator Rashi, who said, and they repeat after, and they all called out as one. The divine spirit rested upon all of them, and they directed their voices and sang the song as it was written. So in other words, it was a miracle, right? We needed a miracle just happened, but here's another miracle. The people got through to the other side, and God sort of allowed them all to know this song at once. God sort of rested, the divine spirit sort of came down and dwelled among the people and gave them those words, and everybody was spontaneously able to sing the song together as one. So I think that's a powerful idea that comes out of Pesach, that we can be of one voice. That sometimes it may be because we're familiar with the words. Sometimes it's because there's something special that's happening that makes us all maybe have a similar reaction at the same time, that puts us all in the state of awe together. Maybe we can ascribe divine spirit to that. And I think some of it is also just, I'm thinking about this for Pesach this year, the idea that even when we are going to be in different places, our voices are actually going to be as one, because we are all going to be engaging in telling the same story and singing the same songs in some way or another. And even if we can't hear each other's voices, I think there's something really powerful in knowing that our voices are being joined together in some kind of way, and that is actually maybe a part of the Passover story as well. This the miracle of voices being able to join together in ways that were sort of unexpected. And that's sort of what we're doing on Zoom too, right? I think the rabbis would have called it a miracle that we can sort of share our voices in a space when we are all literally sitting in different places. So that is Pesach. So we have one body from Sukkot, and we have one voice from Pesach. And there's one more I want to bring us to, and that is Shavuot, with one heart. So I realize I'm moving us a little bit quickly through this, and I apologize. I wish we had a little bit more time to unpack it, but if you have questions, I hope you'll ask them along the way as well. Shavuot, coming 7 weeks after Pesach, tells the story of being at Mount Sinai and the Israelites sort of encamping there and getting ready to get the Torah, to have this moment of intense revelation and an incredible encounter with God. And the language that's used in the Torah is Israel encamped there, but which is, in the English, you can't quite tell what's happening, but in the Hebrew, it's in the singular. It's Israel. It's not that they encamped there, it's that it encamped there, meaning the community. And what this this text in the first box is saying is that everywhere else it talks about them in the plural. They journeyed, they encamped, they quarreled, they did all this. But in this moment, when they went to Mount Sinai, it's written in the singular. It encamped. And I want to share what Rashi, again, the Torah commentator, had to say. And what he said is that there Israel encamped as if one person with one mind. In all the other encampments were made in a murmuring spirit and a spirit of dissension. But in this one moment, they were unified. They had one mind, they had one heart. They were all here for, to use Chancellor Schwartz's language, a shared purpose. But they were all here for a shared purpose of revelation and something really powerful that they had this opportunity to experience. So Shavuot then can be about, if Sukkot is about being one body, we sort of are able to help lift each other up and cover for each other. Pesach can be about one voice, the sort of power that comes from knowing that we are sharing our voices in an experience. And Sukkot can be about having one heart, that we feel united by having a shared purpose, even if at other moments we might find ourselves in very different places from one another. And I want to share a beautiful teaching of this from Rabbi Yaffa Epstein, who is a graduate of Yeshivat Maharat, which is the first Orthodox institution that is ordaining women. And what she has to say is this. The Jewish people had to undergo a transformation from being individuals, each person looking out for themselves, full of disunity and disharmony, into one being, one body with one heart, and I'll add in with one voice. In other words, the Torah is only fit to be given to those who have created peaceful and loving relationships. The Jewish people first needed to become a people of pleasantness, a people who are able to create peace, a people who are able to prioritize relationships over selfish motives. The Jewish people came to understand that lo tov, it is not good to be divided, to be alone, to be motivated by the self. They understood that they needed to come together and to become one people. In other words, in order to enter into the covenantal relationship with the divine, the Jewish people first needed to enter into relationship with each other. I think that's an incredibly powerful and beautiful message of what needed to happen at that first Shavuot, that moment of Mount Sinai. If we're going to come together in body, if we're going to come together in voice, if we're going to come together in heart, we first need to be aware of what it means to come together, to see connectivity between each other, to see harmony, to want relationship with each other, and to understand that that is the fundamental building block of togetherness. And I want to point out something that I think is important here, not just about what Rabbi Yaffa Epstein wrote, but also about all of these texts and all of these holidays, is that togetherness or unity is not the same thing as being all the same. It's not about sameness, right? And just to go back through each one briefly, I want to highlight that a little bit more. So when we talk about what happened with the lulav and being bundled together, the point wasn't to make everyone the same. The point was for each person in their uniqueness and all of our uniqueness to be able to be bundled together with everybody else, to know that we each have something that we can offer each other, and maybe moments where we rely on somebody else. Some days I might be an etrog, but another day I might be a lulav, right? I might not be able to be as generous and as kind as I want to be, and I'm going to be looking to somebody else who can maybe bring that out into the world. On other days, maybe I got it covered, and you can you can sort of take the break if you're not feeling able to be your best self. So again, I think the Sukkot message is telling us togetherness is the goal, but sameness is not the goal. Going back to Pesach, I think many of you might be familiar with the fact that there's actually a second song that comes after this first one that the people all sing together. And that's the song that Miriam led the women in, right? That was actually a separate second song. And I want to point out that I think something that came out of this one voice experience when everyone sang together was this realization that actually this wasn't enough. The song wasn't complete. We needed another voice. And Miriam leads the women in song, saying, we needed more in this picture. And I think that in some ways the togetherness fostered a sense of creativity as well, a need to add in more. And so I want to acknowledge that togetherness doesn't mean you have to only stick to the words that are there, but also maybe it empowers each of us in our voices to figure out what is missing as well to add in. And finally, with Shavuot, one of the most powerful things which occurred to me after I already put this sheet together is that the story of being at Mount Sinai was one of the most inclusive and accessible moments of all time. There's this idea that the people could both see and hear the thunder and the sounds, and that it was sort of multi-sensory. Everybody was there. It was not just the men. Every single person was there. There's a teaching that says even the unborn future generations were present to witness the revelation at Mount Sinai, meaning all of us as well, and everyone going forward in all time. So in being there as of one heart, there was also the sense that each of us might maybe needed something different from the experience, that being unified doesn't mean that we all need or get or gain the same thing from the experience. It's that we all have a way of being there together. And so that I'm going to stop my share now because I want to conclude what I have to say, being able to see all of you a little bit more easily. By the way, if you do want to see these texts again, I'll put my email in the chat. I'm happy to send it to you so you can take a look at these on your own time, hopefully with a little bit more time than I just gave you. So I want to come back to why we're here, which is the shared purpose that Chancellor Schwartz talked about, that I think from our holidays, from the Shalosh Regalim, the 3 pilgrimage festivals, we can have we can experience a togetherness even as we continue to be physically apart right now. And that togetherness, of course, is taking different forms. But I think what we can learn from these holidays are some powerful forms of togetherness, of unity, of beyachad, that include a sense of connectivity that is not about being the same, that each of us will be able to function as our fullest unique selves as we sort of go about celebrating our holidays and being a part of our communities, that we have the opportunity to innovate and to create when we think that something is missing, even as we might join our voices together with everybody else's. And I think that that is actually one of the most powerful contributions that having empowered women's voices has made to the conservative movement and to modern Judaism on the whole. And finally, that if we're willing to be mindful of how to be as inclusive as possible, we can have an experience where we really are of one heart, where we are able to tap into a sense of shared purpose and commitment, even as we might each individually experience that moment in different ways. And so I wish all of us a sense of connectedness, even as we sort of face the challenges of continuing to celebrate our holidays in these different kinds of ways. And I want to tell you that going back to Torah Fund for a moment, I learned all of this working at JTS, right? Even though it is a conservative movement institution, like all of the 5 seminaries that we are talking about here, all of them really reflect an incredible diversity of thought and of passion and of spirit. And I feel very proud to have been a part of that and feel incredibly enriched by being able to train and learn in that space. And I feel incredibly blessed to have been put in a position to be able to help recruit and cultivate the future of leadership in the conservative movement as well over these last couple of years. And I want to tell you that the future is really bright, that we have some incredible, exciting people. You already heard about some of them in the video. I know all of those people. I can attest to them being stellar. The future is bright. There are incredible things coming our way. I know that we sort of are in a lull right now in many ways in sort of the world and in our, in how we're sort of experiencing community. But I hope you can sort of feel excited about what's to come, because I've had the opportunity to see it, and your support is making it happen. So thank you all so much. I know we're going to have some time for questions now. So happy to speak to any questions on what we just learned together or anything else that might be of interest to you to know about. So thank you.
I would like to thank you, Rabbi Ariella Rosen, for a powerful, enlightening Torah study program this morning on Bayachad. I am sure we all learned and appreciated you giving us your time. Thank you again. One heart, one voice, one body. We all have a way of being together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arlene and Rabbi Ariella Rosen. And we're going to have the question and answer period now. So if you have a question, you can either put it in the chat or you can raise your hand, and I will try to find, I'll point you out and you can ask the question.
Fran wants to say something.
Okay.
I'm muted.
Yep.
I want to thank you, Rabbi Ariella. That's such an important message for us now. At times we're so alone. We're just thinking that we're individuals, and yet we have a community that we don't have to think exactly alike, but we're all here for each other. And I really appreciated this learning. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Do we have any questions?
I had just a comment. First of all, thank you, Rabbi. That was wonderful. You were talking about miracles. Well, there is another miracle that the theme B'yachad was chosen 6 months before the pandemic even started. It didn't happen. The pandemic didn't happen first, and we chose it. It was way before. That was a miracle.
That's amazing. It couldn't have been better.
Right. I did have a question about your work and Hillel. I was wondering, you have to work with so many different kinds of students, Jewish students from all kinds of backgrounds, and you're a rabbi, a conservative rabbi from a specific background. And how do you engage with all these students? How do you impact them as a conservative rabbi, and how do you work that out?
Thanks for asking that question. It's been an incredible learning experience for me as somebody who primarily worked only in the conservative movement to then now work in an entirely pluralistic movement. And when I say pluralistic, I don't mean, we just try to make space for everybody. It's like a very active form of pluralism where we work hard constantly to be making sure we're meeting the needs of different students who have very different kinds of Judaic backgrounds. And I'm actually very grateful, because I think in some ways being trained in the conservative movement and at JTS in particular was very helpful for that. One thing, first of all, is that List College, the undergraduate program, while it is part of JTS, is actually itself a pluralistic program. So even though there are certain expectations of public observance of keeping kosher and keeping Shabbat in order to maintain an environment that is supportive of everybody in the school, it actually draws students from a wide variety of backgrounds. And so I actually learned a lot about being a student in a pluralistic Jewish environment from my undergraduate studies, because I had students who went to Orthodox day schools, and I had friends who went to Orthodox day schools, and then in the same friend group, I went to school with people who, this was their first formal Jewish education, was coming to JTS as a student. And that was incredibly helpful for me, breaking down the assumptions that I held about what did Jewish people know and care about and were they interested in, and assuming that everybody had an interest in Shabbat in the same ways that I did. And I was like, oh my gosh, wait, you're going out on a Friday night? Like, oh, I didn't realize that was okay, but it is, because that's where you're coming from. That's great, right? So it was a great learning for me. And also, I think there's something special about being in the middle, the conservative movement being where it is positionally. Sometimes it can be hard to articulate, I'm not this and I'm not that, I'm sort of in the middle, but there's actually something incredibly helpful about that for me, because I feel like I can actually speak to everybody in a lot of ways because of where I'm coming from. I got the solid Jewish education that lets me study Talmud with Orthodox students and sort of them be able to respect my background and my knowledge and where I'm coming from. And also I know what it means to not need, I also know that I need to translate every Hebrew word that I use for students, because I know that some people are coming from a different place. And in our communities, there's a wide range too of some people who have had access to many years of Jewish education, and some of us who maybe are coming into it more recently. And all of that is amazing. And I think what the best thing that my training has helped me learn is that that everybody has something valuable to offer, right? And it's not just about, we don't place value on how much Jewish education somebody has or what their Jewish background is. Everybody has something powerful and personal to offer to a community. And so working in Hillel, that's been, I learned that at JTS, to be honest, and in working in the conservative movement communities since my time as a student. And it served me well at Hillel to be able to say, and say it and mean it to everybody I meet, that you have something really important to contribute to this community here.
Great, thank you.
I noticed that Joan Lowenstein, you have a question?
You're muted.
Sorry, you would think I would know by now. Thank you, Rabbi. That was a great talk and inspiring. And my question is, working with the younger people these days, are you finding that there is a lot of interest in Judaism? Are they are you finding it difficult to get them interested in being active in religion, in Judaism, or recruiting them and having them practice?
It's a great question. So, I think that one of the things I had to learn early on as a rabbi, not just in Hillel, was that you don't just sort of create something and assume people will show up, right? Like, just because I find something is interesting doesn't mean that other people will. And it's not the if you build it, they will come mentality. It's really about finding out what people are interested in, what people want. And so, the culture varies between the three campuses that I'm a part of, just because they historically have had different exposure to having rabbis and educators on the campuses. But I'm finding that there is a deep desire to learn and to be connected, and not every student is able to articulate exactly what they want to learn, but they can articulate at least that they want to learn. And so, so we're doing a lot of different kinds of things. I'm doing a what's called the Jewish Learning Fellowship, which is a Hillel International creation that is all about building a sense of community and personal connection to Jewish ideas around big questions that are in our lives today. Like, what does it mean to sort of know my own story and to navigate conflict and to think about what I value in my friendships and things like that. But then I'm also doing like a weekly Talmud study that, students who want to study Talmud are showing up to, and I'm actually getting it previously was just students who knew they wanted to study Talmud, and it's starting to expand to students who are like, oh, I'm curious about this. I don't know what this is. But a lot of it honestly came from taking the time to get to know who's in this community. I'm doing a lot more this semester than I did last semester, because last semester was a lot of listening. So I would say that there's, it's mixed. Some students are, this is a hard time to be a student. It's a hard time to do anything, but it's a hard time to be a student. So some students are sort of putting their heads down, getting their work done, and saying, I don't have much energy for more than that right now. And there are others who are saying, I'm stuck at home. I can't go to campus. I really need to feel connected to community. And others who are saying, I need to learn in a different kind of way. I need something that doesn't feel like school, because I still am curious and want to learn more things. So it really depends, but I'm finding, more than I expected, that students are really hungry for learning.
Great, thank you.
We have another question from Shuly Altman, and she asks, how is Hillel helping Jewish students to cope with the increased anti-Semitism on campus?
That's a really important question. It's sort of an all hands on deck effort. It's something that we're sort of, there's a whole team that is on this in different kinds of ways. We have the directors of each campus who are sort of the ones who put out formal statements in relationship with a lot of the different campus groups that might be engaging in anti-Semitic conversations or activities, or sort of being the liaisons with the university administration if an incident occurs and needs to be dealt with. There are advocacy professionals on each campus whose job it is to really support students in advocating for themselves, but also helping them build relationships with others on campus, because we know that coalitions are important, that knowing who, if we're willing to show up for somebody else, hopefully they're willing to show up for us, and building those relationships between other non-Jewish groups on campus can be really important. So we have people who do that. I see my role mostly as pastoral. So it's I'm less about how do we solve this problem and more about what is happening for you? How can I help you emotionally navigate this? And how can I help you feel a sense of confidence in your Jewish self, regardless and going forward? And we sort of all have our different roles to play in dealing with this. And then, Hillel Ontario is a unified organization, even as we work on many campuses. So there, we also have people sort of at the top who work with all of the campuses who help navigate and that, some of the more challenging and stickier situations. They help sort of mentor and guide everyone through it, who are just a little bit more seasoned in this kind of work. So it's unfortunate that it's work that has to be done, but I feel grateful that there are many of us who can play different roles in supporting students when those incidents come up. And I'm thankful that at least right now, in some ways, not being on campus, there are sort of fewer incidents. Not that nothing's happening, but in some ways, it's not as frequent as, from what I understand, it has been in other years.
Thank you. There's another question from Janet. And is there any recognition of the need for young university alumni to remain connected, and any efforts being made for those youth?
Yes, I actually feel very passionate about this. I'm new to the organization, so I can only sort of more speak from my own personal interest in this. But I will say that from the organizational standpoint at Hillel, I know that we do have at least one person whose job is alumni engagement, trying to help alumni stay connected to their Hillel experience in some kind of way. But in general, I feel very strongly about the importance of my work in transition moments for students. So it's helping them transition from high school into being university students, but also transitioning from being university students to being young adults and being alumni, because each step along the way, there's a different sort of sense of independence that comes with it, and making that transition can be challenging. And I know that especially for students in Toronto, many of whom are living at home through university, actually post-university is when a lot of them for the first time are building their own independent Jewish lives outside of the home that they grew up in. Whereas, in the United States, for most students are living in residence where they go to school who are active in Hillels. It's sort of a different timeline. But either way, when you're off on your own, there's sort of this question of like, oh, I really like Shabbat dinner, but I don't know how to do it. Or I want to celebrate a holiday, but like now I don't have Hillel, I don't really know where to go for it. And I know a lot of organizations in the GTA who are doing this work. So I sort of see my job as being about helping students connect to those things and know what they are. And also make sure they know that we're not going to forget about them anytime soon. And what I've always said to people who I've worked with is, once I'm your rabbi, I'm always your rabbi. And hopefully you'll have other rabbis too, but you should know that you can always come to me, no matter where you find yourself.
That's great, thank you. And it's not a question, but it's a statement. Just a second, I find it here. Hold on. Arlene was saying, even braiding a challah reminds me of our togetherness, which is true, definitely.
That's a beautiful, yes.
Do we have any other questions?
I actually wanted to share one more image while we're thinking about questions. I was thinking about this with Shabbat. I actually was doing some calibrating with students lately, so that idea was also in my mind. But we also have that with the candles, right? Because on Friday night, we light candles, 2 candles that are sort of distinct. I mean, some of us might light more, some of us might less, but many of us light 2 candles. And for Havdalah, even though we have these beautiful sort of braided Havdalah candles that do the trick too, all you really technically need are 2 individual flames that are brought together. So technically, if you don't have a Havdalah candle, all you need is to take 2 regular, any kind of candles and hold them together to make 1 flame. And it's this idea that Shabbat sort of fosters that unity, that togetherness also, where we sort of maybe start here, but we end here, we end connected. And that the challah image reminded me of that. So I thought it'd be nice to share that with you as well.
It's lovely, very nice. Do we have any other questions? Doesn't look like it, no? Okay. Well, thank you, Rabbi Ariella Rosen. That was wonderful. Very interesting, and we learned a lot from it. I'd now like to call on my mom, Fran Kane, who's going to say a few words about the Torah Fund greeting cards.
And are they going to be on the screen?
Okay, we're to share that. Just a second.
Yeah, they're coming up. Just give me a moment, please.
Let's start talking, Fran.
Okay. I want to, well, not quite this one. I want to thank you for coming to BTW, Beth Tikvah Women's Torah Fund program. Beth Tikvah Women is part of Women's League for Conservative Judaism. Women's League is the umbrella organization for conservative sisterhoods throughout North America. And Torah Fund is the dedicated tzedakah for Women's League. The name Torah Fund does not mean we collect money for Torahs. All the money raised goes for Jewish learning with scholarships and programs at our 5 conservative seminaries. And we've had them mentioned to you. They'll be mentioned again. All these schools offer excellent formal and informal education for the future leaders of the conservative movement. Most seminary students cannot afford this education on their own. The scholarships and programs funded by Torah Fund help them make ends meet. Our members and friends can help support Torah Fund by buying Torah Fund greeting cards, as you can see on the screen. They're there for all occasions. You can order an assortment for your own mailing or call me and I will mail them out for you, $6 including postage. Our theme for this for 2020 to 2021 was Biachad, so fitting for our troubling times. This pin is also available. The pin is a thank you for donations of $180 or more. Remember, Torah Fund for your tzedakah.
Thank you very much, Mom. Now I'd like to call on Marilyn Cohen, who is the Torah Fund Vice President of our region, INR, to say a few words about Torah Fund. Marilyn?
I have to unmute. Thanks to everyone for your participation today and for coming and joining us. Above all, thank you so much to Rabbi Ariella Rosen for her amazing Torah study session today on our theme Biachad. Listening to her and to our video by Chancellor Shuly Rubin Schwartz was truly inspiring. If you stop to think about it, how remarkable is it that we have scholars and teachers who not only are learned in Jewish law, but have the ability to connect so profoundly with all the people around them. Our speakers today are a tiny glimpse into the amazing world of our conservative Masorti spiritual leaders. After all, we have 5 seminaries, as you've heard, they're all teaching and influencing hundreds of students and thousands of alumni who in turn go out into the world to teach and inspire so many others. Does it not follow that we should say Toda Rabbah to them all through our support of Torah Fund? So you now understand that our Torah Fund dollars go to support the students and their programs at our 5 conservative seminaries around the world. There are a few ways we can do this. Fran told you about purchasing Torah Fund cards. We also have tzedakah boxes that we can deliver to you or you can pick up at the synagogue office, and into which you can deposit your weekly tzedakah before lighting Shabbat candles. When it's filled, we'll gladly count your coins and send in your donation. Or you can donate $180 or higher and receive the Torah Fund Biachad pin, as you see some of us are wearing, as a gift. You can also give a straight donation of any amount. Thank you to everyone who already gave their donations to Torah Fund when registering for this program. If you haven't already donated, or you were inspired to give more, and if you are a Beth Tikvah member, you can simply call the office or click on the link on the Zoom email that we got from Adele to pay with a credit card. If you're a member of another sisterhood, please contact your own Torah Fund share to donate whichever way she suggests. All Canadian Torah Fund donations go through our Jewish Theological Society in Toronto, which issues our Canadian tax-deductible receipts. Americans have the advantage of donating online through the Torah Fund website, but Canadians don't have that option yet. I'm told they're working on it. So if you're still not sure about anything to do with Torah Fund, please don't hesitate to contact me anytime. And thank you again for your participation in our program today. I believe, Adele, you have a few words to sum up.
Thank you, Marilyn. That's wonderful. And before we end, I just want to call on Joan Lowenstein, and she's just going to tell us about our convention that's coming up in April. Joan?
Thank you, Adele. And thank you all for your support of Torah Fund and Women's League. It is so wonderful to see you all. Of course, it would be more wonderful to see you in person, but it is what it is. This was a wonderful program. Thank you so much, Rabbi. And yes, we have our region conference coming up in April, April 25th. It's a Sunday, save the day. It's going to be a virtual, of course, this time. So come for a few programs. There's a great programming being planned, and come for a few or come for the whole day. And look for more information in our region newsletter. And if you are not receiving that bi-weekly Highlines newsletter, I'm going to put my email address in the chat because we're coming to an end and I'm not going to have time to jot down everyone's email. If by any chance you're not receiving that, you can email me and I will put that in here real quickly. At WLCJ.org. So if by any chance you're not receiving our region newsletter, send me an email and I'll make sure you get on that list. And thank you all again for your support of Women's League and Torah Fund. And again, wonderful to visit with you, even virtually. Thank you so much, Adele.
Thank you, Joan. Wonderful. I'd now like to thank my executive committee and especially the women who put together today's program. Marilyn Cohen, my mom, Fran Kane, Rivi Blas, Arlene Silver, and the rest of my executive for helping with everything. I couldn't do this job without you. Thank you very much. Now, Beth Tikvah Women has some very exciting programs coming up. In April, we will be having a guest speaker, Rachel Muslea is her name, and she grew up in Calcutta. She's going to be speaking on music and memory, the personal story of a Baghdad Jewish family. So that'll be in April. And in May, we'll be having the crime writer, Robert Rotenberg, speak about his latest book called Downfall. And if you've enjoyed today's program, this is one of the advantages of being a member of Beth Tikvah Women. And at the same time, you will become a member of Women's League for Conservative Judaism. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing you at our next program. Thank you again.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Oh, and thank you, Doris Alter, our executive director from Beth Tikvah. Sorry, I didn't thank you earlier. We couldn't have done this without you.
That's for sure. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.